Okay, let's break this down. Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we sift through, a stack of sources, articles, research, our own notes, and really try to extract those essential nuggets of knowledge or insight. The goal is to give you a real shortcut to feeling, well, profoundly well-informed.
That's the idea.
And today, we're plunging into a story that's not just newsworthy. It feels potentially history-making. We're talking about a groundbreaking new drug that really stands to revolutionize the fight against HIV. It could impact both prevention and treatment.
Yeah, massively.
But here's the twist, and it's a big one. This medical marvel, it's also right at the very epicenter of this really heated global debate about access, about equity.
That's absolutely right. And our mission, I think, in this deep dive is really to pull apart the specific details of this remarkable breakthrough. We're drawing critical insights from a recent, pretty impactful Guardian article that lays bare both the scientific triumph and, well, the intense controversy around it.
Right.
It's absolutely crucial for us and for you listening to grasp not only what this drug is, what it promises to do, but why its impending arrival on the market is igniting such a fundamental global conversation. Who gets access to life-changing medicine?
Yeah.
We want to arm you with a truly comprehensive understanding so you can navigate this complex, really critical global issue with genuine insight.
And the tension here, the core tension, it's almost unbelievable when you lay it out. Picture this.
Yeah.
A drug, one that's genuinely being described by leading public health figures. They're using phrases like potential to end the HIV pandemic. I mean, that's a truly monumental claim.
Huge.
Now, imagine new rigorous research suggesting this very drug could be produced for, well, pennies on the dollar, just $25 a year.
Yeah.
And that figure apparently includes a healthy profit margin for the manufacturer.
Yeah, that's key. It includes profit.
Yet it's poised to launch with an initial price tag that's literally, 1,000 times higher?
1,000 times. It's staggering.
So the core question we're wrestling with today is, how do we even begin to reconcile such an incredible medical breakthrough with the urgent, undeniable global need for equitable access? Especially when we're talking about ending a pandemic, it feels like this classic ethical, economic dilemma just massively amplified by the human stakes. Decades of a global health crisis.
Precisely. It puts everything into such sharp focus.
Okay, so let's get into the science first, because here's where it gets truly fascinating. Let's introduce the star of our deep dive, Lenacapavir. So what exactly is this drug? Why is it causing such a stir, in the medical community?
Well, from the sources we've looked at, it's not just another treatment, although it is that too. Primarily, the excitement is around it being a novel HIV prevention drug.
Yeah.
And it's administered via injection.
Okay, injection, not a pill.
Exactly. And what makes it particularly groundbreaking is this dual functionality you mentioned earlier. It's already in use right now as a critical treatment for people who are living with HIV, especially those who've developed resistance to other drugs. So for them, it offers new hope.
Which is huge in itself.
Absolutely huge. But the truly revolutionary part, the bit that could change global health dynamics, lies in its prevention capabilities. The clinical trial results. They've unequivocally shown its ability to prevent someone from becoming infected with HIV in the first place.
Wow.
And this distinction, right, its power to prevent new infections. That's what shifts it. It moves from being just a breakthrough treatment to potentially being a genuine game changer for public health on a truly global scale.
Okay, so prevention is the key here. How does it work differently from what we already have? Because we do have prevention pills, PrEP.
Yeah, you've hit on the precise point of its immense significance. For decades, our main preventative strategy, as you say, has largely relied on those daily oral pills, PEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, and they're incredibly effective if they're taken consistently.
That's the big if, isn't it? Daily adherence.
It's a massive if. Daily adherence can be a really significant challenge for so many people. Life gets in the way, right? Busy schedules, maybe social stigma in some communities, simply forgetting a dose.
Or just getting to the pharmacy regularly.
Exactly. Logistical hurdles, too. And all these factors, unfortunately, can diminish the real-world effectiveness of these daily regimens. What Lenacapavir offers is, well, it's a paradigm shift in the whole approach.
How so?
We're talking about a long-acting injectable format. It's given as a subcutaneous injection just under the skin only twice a year.
Twice a year, instead of 365 pills.
Exactly. Think about that. 2 doses annually versus 365 pills. This dramatically infrequent dosage schedule. It has the potential to absolutely transform adherence rates. It makes prevention efforts far more practical, much more scalable, and ultimately more effective. Especially, in high prevalence communities or countries where maintaining consistent daily medication might be really difficult. Socioeconomic factors, infrastructure limitations, this cuts through a lot of that.
That makes perfect sense. It removes a huge barrier.
It's a leap, not just in pharmacology, but really in public health strategy itself.
So when we hear these bold, almost audacious claims like potential to end the HIV pandemic, what does that actually mean in practice for public health, for global goals?
Yeah.
It sounds, frankly, almost too good to be true, given how long we've battled HIV.
It is a very bold claim, and yeah, it's important we unpack the context behind it. When public health experts talk about ending a pandemic, they don't usually mean eradicating the virus entirely from the planet. I mean, that's the ultimate dream, like with smallpox, but it's incredibly hard.
Right, eradication is different.
Exactly. So in the context of HIV, ending the pandemic primarily signifies stopping new infections. Think about the chain of transmission. Person A infects person B, who infects person C, and so on.
Okay.
If you introduce a highly effective prevention tool like Lenacapavir, something that breaks that chain, prevents A from infecting B or B from infecting C, you dramatically slow down, and eventually you can halt the spread of the virus.
Stop it in its tracks.
Essentially, yes. If you can significantly reduce or even eliminate the rate of new infections globally, then over time, the number of people living with the virus will gradually decline. Because existing cases are managed with treatment, people live longer, healthier lives, but fewer new people are entering that pool.
So the overall number eventually shrinks.
Right. The pandemic loses its momentum, its reproductive number, the famous R0, drops below 1, and it stops being a public health crisis in the way we currently understand it. So a highly effective, long-acting preventative drug like Lenacapavir, it's seen as this powerful tool to, as some leaders put it, turn off the tap of new infections.
I like that phrase, turn off the tap.
It's very evocative, isn't it? It's not just about managing an ongoing crisis anymore. It's about shifting to containment and ultimately winding down the global spread, breaking the cycle on a scale we haven't really been able to contemplate before.
And this isn't some far-off dream, is it? It's not theoretical, stuck in a lab somewhere. It's happening now. The Guardian article, it highlights that U.S. regulatory approval for Lenacapavir is actually expected, well, basically this week, around June 19th, 2025.
That's right. It's imminent.
Which means it's about to hit the market. That's an incredibly fast-moving development. And just for context, the company bringing this drug forward is Gilead Sciences.
Precisely. And that immediate proximity to market launch, it really underscores the urgency, the immediate relevance of this entire conversation we're having. It's not abstract anymore.
So,
And, when we consider medical breakthroughs of this magnitude, it's vital to remember they don't just spring into existence overnight. Lenacapavir and drugs like it, they represent the culmination of literal decades of painstaking scientific effort.
yeah, you forget that sometimes.
You do. We're talking potentially billions of dollars in private and public R&D investment. Thousands upon thousands of hours dedicated to rigorous clinical trials, multiple phases, from labs to animals to thousands of human participants. It's a testament to incredible human ingenuity, perseverance, and often significant risk-taking, trying to tackle these complex global diseases.
Absolutely.
The science behind understanding HIV at a molecular level, figuring out how to intercept it with such a long-acting, potent agent, that in itself is a truly remarkable feat of modern medicine.
So, okay, we have this extraordinary scientific achievement, a potential game changer, as you say. But now, let's turn to what has quickly become the central controversy, the elephant in the room we hinted at. This is where this stark reality really hits home.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean when we look at the potential price tag? According to these initial industry estimates, the reports we're seeing,
Right.
the market price for Lenacapavir as a preventative medication, it's expected to hover around $25,000
Oh, yeah.
per patient per year, which is roughly, what, 18,400 pounds?
Yeah.
And if it's used as a treatment for people already living with HIV, that cost apparently goes even higher, around $39,000 annually.
That's correct. Those are the ballpark figures being discussed.
Those are truly staggering sums, broadly on par, the sources say, with current preventive meds available in high-income markets.
Indeed. And this is precisely where the conversation takes that sharp, almost jarring turn. It reveals this profound study in contrast that has frankly sparked outrage among global health advocates. While Gilead hasn't, publicly declared its official price yet.
Right, these are estimates.
These are external estimates, yes, but they certainly place it in that very high range you just mentioned. However, we have this powerful counter-narrative. It comes from compelling, independent research, conducted by the University of Liverpool, collaborating with other prominent researchers and institutions.
Okay, what did they find?
Their detailed analysis yielded an absolutely astonishing finding. Lenacapavir could actually be manufactured and sold for only $25. Just $25. Or £18.40 per patient per year.
$25 versus $25,000.
Exactly. And what makes this finding particularly striking and honestly so concerning for advocates is that this $25 figure includes a 30% profit margin for the manufacturer.
So that's not just the cost price.
No, this isn't a break-even estimate. It's a calculation that factors in a substantial return for the producer already.
Wait, I need to underscore that for everyone listening because the numbers are just so stark. We're talking about an estimated market price of $25,000 versus an estimated manufacturing cost with profit included of just $25.
Yeah.
That's an almost unfathomable difference. It's 1,000 times.
1,000-fold difference. It's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. That's not just a large margin. It's an enormous chasm, and it directly impacts millions of lives. Now, Dr. Andrew Hill, he's one of the leading researchers behind this independent analysis, right? He's been pivotal in these calculations. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on the methodology? How did they arrive at that $25 figure, and how has it changed?
Absolutely. Dr. Hill's work is crucial here because it provides these transparent insights into the true cost of production, something that's often a complete black box in pharmaceutical pricing.
We rarely see those numbers.
Almost never. His team's methodology, it involves analyzing various factors. They look at the cost of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, the API, that's the core chemical compound. They also factor in expenses for formulation, turning that raw compound into a stable, injectable product. Then there's packaging, distribution, and a reasonable overhead for manufacturing.
Okay, pretty comprehensive.
Yes. And last year, his initial calculations, they were based on a smaller assumed scale of production. That projected a generic price of around $40 annually for Lenacapavir.
Still incredibly cheap compared to $25,000.
Oh, absolutely. But then, as global interest from generic manufacturers intensified, and as the potential for massively scaled-up production became clearer, they did a new, updated analysis.
And that's where the $25 came from.
Exactly. This revised research showed that if annual demand reached about 2 million doses, the drug could be mass-produced for somewhere between $35 to $46 a year. Still very low. But here's the critical insight. If production scales up even further to between 5 million and 10 million doses each year.
Which seems plausible for a drug like this.
Absolutely plausible for something with pandemic-ending potential. At that scale, the manufacturing cost, inclusive of that 30% profit margin we keep mentioning, drops dramatically down to just $25.
Wow.
It powerfully illustrates the immense economies of scale possible with these high-demand, high-volume products. It's just a stark, compelling illustration of how mass production can lead to monumental reductions in the per-unit cost.
It truly makes you wonder, then. What are the profound implications of such a vast price difference for global health? I mean, when you're talking about a potential 1,000-fold gap between the actual cost to make it profitably and the projected market price, what does that practically mean for the millions of people, especially in poorer countries, who desperately need this, both for treatment and especially for prevention?
It means everything. It's potentially the difference between a genuine global health revolution and just another missed opportunity for broad, equitable access.
Right.
While pharmaceutical companies understandably point to the significant necessary costs of R&D, the complexities of manufacturing, marketing, the financial risk where many drugs fail, the Liverpool analysis, by specifically including that substantial profit margin, critically challenges the idea that the high market price is solely about recouping those investments.
It suggests there's room for affordability.
A lot of room. If a drug can be profitably made and distributed for $25, it fundamentally begs the question, why would it be sold for $25,000? For global health, this gap translates directly into accessibility. And critically, equity. A drug that's technologically possible, incredibly effective, offers unprecedented public health benefits. It might just remain largely unavailable to the vast populations who need it most, simply because the price is prohibitive.
So the breakthrough doesn't reach the people.
Exactly. This isn't just about covering costs anymore. It raises fundamental, urgent questions about value, about innovation incentives, about fair distribution in a global context, particularly for a product with such profound implications for public health, for human well-being. It just highlights that persistent, complex, ethical tightrope pharmaceutical companies have to walk between their commercial interests and their societal role.
Given those stark numbers and the monumental potential here, it's hardly surprising there's this immense, unified push from global health leaders, from campaigners demanding genuine affordability. What exactly are they saying? Who are the key voices leading this charge?
Oh, the call is urgent, it's impassioned, and it's unified. From pretty much every corner of the global health community, campaigners are demanding, in no uncertain terms, that Gilead make the drug available and affordable for all who need it. These aren't just polite policy requests, you know?
No, it sounds more forceful than
There
that.
it is. They're powerful and passioned pleas. They're rooted in decades of arduous experience battling HIV/AIDS epidemics and constantly confronting these access barriers. Dr. Andrew Hill, the researcher whose analysis we just discussed, he issues a stark and unequivocal warning. He states explicitly that making Lenacapavir unaffordable in countries with high HIV epidemics wouldn't just hinder progress, it could actively worsen the situation, potentially reversing hard-won gains.
Wow, that's a serious warning.
It is, and he goes even further. He emphasizes this isn't just a problem for low-income nations. He notes, and I quote roughly, that even high-income countries will not be able to afford wide-scale use of Lenacapavir at prices above $20,000 a year.
That's a crucial point. High prices hurt everyone's health systems.
Exactly. It's not just restricting access in poorer countries. It strains the healthcare budgets of wealthy nations, too. It makes universal prevention programs economically unviable even there. So this isn't just about charity. It's about universal public health pragmatism. It affects everyone's ability to control the epidemic.
That's a critical dimension often overlooked. It's not just a humanitarian issue for developing nations, it's a practical necessity for any country hoping to implement wide-scale, effective prevention strategies to really curb the epidemic within their own borders.
Precisely. And then you have the incredibly powerful and direct voice of Dr. Winnie Byanyima. She's the executive director of UNAIDS, the Joint United Nations program on HIV/AIDS. Her statement just cuts directly to the moral core of the matter.
What does she say?
She declared unequivocally, to charge 1,000 times more for a medicine with pandemic-ending potential would be abhorrent. We cannot end AIDS with medicines that are so costly.
Abhorrent. That's strong language.
Very strong. And her words aren't just an ethical condemnation, they're a strategic assessment. She's highlighting the direct conflict between a profit-driven pricing model and the actual global public health objective. She vividly envisions these long-acting preventive medicines like Lenacapavir as a truly historic breakthrough for countries worldwide. She sees them offering this unparalleled opportunity to turn off the tap of new infections and fundamentally alter the trajectory of the pandemic.
So for her, the price is the main obstacle to realizing that vision.
Completely. For Dr. Byanyima and many others, this drug represents maybe the most significant opportunity in decades to actually control HIV. And that opportunity could be tragically squandered by prohibitive pricing policies.
And when we talk about turning off the tap, we need to remember the scale here. It's not a small leak we're dealing with. It's a significant flow. The scale of the ongoing HIV challenge, it remains immense despite all the progress we've made.
It really is.
In 2023 alone, there were still 1.3 million new HIV infections globally. That's a huge number.
Staggering still.
And the World Health Organization, they've set a very clear, very ambitious target. Approximately 10 million people need to be taking HIV prevention drugs to achieve the global goals for epidemic control. This isn't just some abstract number. It's a concrete, urgent public health imperative. Millions of lives are at stake.
It truly is. The stakes are incredibly high, especially when you consider the broader kind of precarious global context right now. There are widespread and frankly legitimate fears that aid cuts from various donor nations, a trend that's been exacerbated by shifting global priorities, economic pressures, that these cuts could tragically reverse decades of hard-won progress in controlling HIV.
Right. Funding is fragile.
Very fragile. For years, massive international investment, through programs like PEPFAR, the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, and the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, that investment has driven down infection rates, expanded treatment access hugely.
It made a massive difference.
A world of difference. So, in such a fragile, funding-constrained environment, affordable drugs like lenacapavir become not just beneficial, but absolutely critical for sustained progress. If these highly effective prevention tools remain financially out of reach for the majority of the world's population, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, which still bears a disproportionate burden.
Then the progress could stall or even reverse.
Exactly. The existing gains could easily erode. It could lead to a devastating resurgence of the epidemic in vulnerable populations. It could potentially undo what has been one of public health's greatest achievements of the last few decades. The fight is far, far from over, and affordability is absolutely key to finishing it.
So it really does boil down to this fundamental ethical, philosophical question, doesn't it? Is access to life-saving medication a basic human right? Something that should be universally guaranteed? Or is it ultimately just a market commodity subject to the highest bidder, supply and demand? This case, lenacapavir, it seems to perfectly encapsulate that inherent tension between the pharmaceutical company's undeniable profit motives and their profound, arguably moral role in global public health.
It absolutely does. And it's a dilemma that societies have grappled with repeatedly throughout medical history, right? From insulin decades ago to groundbreaking cancer drugs more recently.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme.
It is. On one hand, pharmaceutical companies operate within a capitalist market system. They have shareholders, they have employees, they need to generate profit to sustain their operations, and crucially, to reinvest in that incredibly expensive, time-consuming, and often very risky process of drug discovery.
The pipeline for new drugs.
Exactly. Without that financial incentive, the argument goes, future innovations might simply not materialize. Developing new drugs is a high-stakes gamble. Many promising candidates fail at various stages, costing billions. That's one side.
Right.
However, on the other hand, when a drug possesses the potential to end a pandemic, when it directly addresses a global public good that impacts economic stability, social welfare, millions of lives, its societal value arguably transcends typical market dynamics.
It becomes something bigger than just a product.
You could argue that, yes, the ethical argument shifts. Should something so vital, with such broad, transformative public health benefits, be subject to pricing models that effectively deny it to a significant portion of the global population, especially those in greatest need? This tension isn't easily resolved. There are complex arguments on both sides, valid points, but it is a dialogue that must happen, and it highlights this intricate moral and economic landscape of modern medicine, pushing us all to ask, what kind of world do we actually want to build?
Okay. We've heard the impassioned arguments from campaigners, from global health leaders. They're powerful, they're compelling, and they rightly highlight these critical issues. But it's equally crucial, I think, for us to understand the other side of the story as well, to provide a balanced, comprehensive view for you listening. So what exactly has Gilead, the manufacturer, said in response to these widespread calls for affordability, for broader access? It's important we grasp their perspective, too.
Yes, it is. And Gilead has indeed issued statements addressing these concerns, trying to clarify their position and outline their commitments. They assert that the company understands the importance of access for lenacapavir for pre-EP, that's the prevention use, if it receives regulatory approval for that indication.
Okay, so they acknowledge the need.
They acknowledge the need. They also state they're taking steps at what they describe as unprecedented speed to plan for global access, with a particular focus, they say, on low and lower middle income countries, acknowledging that these are regions where the need is greatest for HIV prevention tools.
Have they outlined any concrete actions?
They have. To demonstrate this commitment, they've struck agreements with 6 generic drug manufacturers.
Right.
These agreements are designed to allow for the production of lower-cost generic versions of lenacapavir, specifically for 120 low-income countries.
120 countries, that sounds significant.
It is a significant number of countries geographically. Furthermore, Gilead has made a quite significant promise to supply doses for approximately 2 million people at no profit before these generic supplies become widely available. The idea is to try and bridge that immediate access gap while the generics ramp up production.
Okay, so providing some initial doses at cost, or no profit, while waiting for generics in those 120 countries, that seems like, well, it's like an effort.
It is an effort, yes.
What then is their justification for the higher initial prices we were talking about, the $25,000 or $39,000 figures, beyond just the general R&D costs we always hear cited?
Well, Gilead's justification for those higher initial price estimates, it hinges on a few key points. These are pretty common arguments you hear in the industry. First, they contend that the external price estimates, like Dr. Hill's $25 figure, are based on assumptions of higher future use of HIV prevention drugs than Gilead's own market models are currently projecting.
So they're saying the demand might not be that high initially.
Essentially, yes. They're suggesting that while the potential market is huge, the actual uptake in the near term might not be as widespread as some researchers' models predict, at least not right away, which introduces a risk factor for their investment.
Okay, that's one point. What else?
Second, and perhaps more significantly, they emphasize that their global price planning is an ongoing, incredibly complex process, and it has to take into account, quoting them roughly, nearly 2 decades of research and development, constant learning and iteration, and manufacturing investments to deliver Lenacapavir at scale.
Unpack that a bit. 2 decades of work.
Right. Think about the sheer scale of that investment. You have the basic science, the preclinical studies, then the phased clinical trials, phase 1, 2, 3. These are enormously expensive, can take many, many years, and often have a high failure rate. Many drugs don't make it through.
Sure.
Then there's the cost of navigating regulatory approval processes in dozens of countries, and the massive capital investment needed to build and scale manufacturing facilities to produce a complex new chemical entity at a global level. So they're effectively arguing that the sticker price isn't just about the raw materials, it's a reflection of the extensive financial intellectual capital invested over a very long period to bring this innovative drug from a concept in a lab to being available globally.
So recouping R&D and incentivizing future innovation, that's the core argument.
That is the industry's standard and arguably necessary defense against criticisms of high pricing, yes.
That certainly sounds like a reasoned response on their part, acknowledging the need for access, striking generic deals for some countries, while also justifying their substantial investment over decades. However, campaigners, they've consistently pointed out this crucial detail, something that appears to significantly complicate Gilead's otherwise, commendable-sounding global access efforts. What's that sticking point? What's the nuance that changes the picture?
The crucial detail, the one campaigners are fiercely highlighting, is what they refer to as the excluded countries.
The excluded country.
Yes. Despite Gilead's stated agreements with generic manufacturers covering those 120 low-income countries, which is, objectively, a positive step, campaigners argue that countries where a substantial proportion, estimated to be about a third of all new HIV cases occur, those countries are excluded from this specific Gilead scheme.
A third of new cases are in excluded countries. That's huge. Which countries are we talking about?
These strategically vital, yet often overlooked excluded countries include places with significant populations and high HIV burdens, places like Brazil, Argentina, and parts of Eastern Europe. This exclusion creates a glaring and deeply concerning gap in what aims to be a comprehensive global access strategy.
That does seem like a huge blind spot, especially considering the high incidence rates in some of those regions. Why? Why might these specific countries be excluded from a scheme that's seemingly designed for low-income nations? And what are the broader implications of leaving out these populations for the goal of ending the pandemic globally?
Well, it often comes down to the somewhat rigid and often problematic classification systems used by international bodies. The World Bank, the WHO, they categorize countries: low income, lower middle income, upper middle income, high income.
Right, those income brackets.
Exactly. And while countries like Brazil or Argentina might have substantial internal economic disparities and high HIV burdens within certain populations, they are frequently classified as upper middle income countries overall.
So they're too rich for the low-income scheme.
Ironically, yes. That classification often places them outside the scope of schemes specifically designed for the lowest income nations.
Yeah.
Even if their healthcare systems are severely strained and large parts of their populations cannot possibly afford high-priced drugs. Eastern Europe presents a similar challenge. Many nations there don't fit neatly into traditional developing world categories, but they still face significant economic hurdles for universal drug access due to different geopolitical and economic realities.
So the classification system itself creates gaps.
It can, yes. The implication of excluding these regions is severe. It's far-reaching. It creates what people call access deserts, or the missing middle. It leaves large, vulnerable populations without affordable access to potentially life-saving prevention and treatment. And if a third of new HIV infections are continuing to occur in places where access to this game-changing drug is restricted by price, well, it critically undermines the entire global effort to end the pandemic.
You can't end it globally if you leave out a third of the problem.
Precisely. It means that while progress might be made in some areas, significant hotspots of new infections will just persist. It prevents the global transmission chain from truly being broken. It's a stark reminder that even the best intentions in global health can fall short because of the complexities of economic classification and market segmentation.
Is there any other hope for those countries?
Well, on a slightly more optimistic note, European regulatory approvals for Lenacapavir are also expected later this year. Those approvals can typically facilitate subsequent approvals in many other low and middle income countries that often rely on bodies like the EMA for guidance, so that could potentially offer another pathway for broader availability. They're not necessarily at the lowest generic prices that might become available in those 120 included countries initially. So it's a mixed picture, but that missing middle remains a critical challenge.
Okay, let's try to unpack this a bit further then. This specific case, Lenacapavir, it feels like it's not just about one drug or one company. It really serves as this powerful, real-time case study for much broader implications: global health, medical innovation, societal ethics. What are some of the bigger takeaways here that you think listeners should really grasp from this whole situation?
Yeah, I think there are several really big ones. One absolutely major takeaway is the growing, truly transformative importance of long-acting injectables, not just for HIV, but for the future of disease prevention and management overall.
Beyond HIV.
Oh, yeah. Imagine the potential. Long-acting contraception that frees women from daily pill burdens, revolutionary treatments for chronic diseases like diabetes, or even other infectious diseases like malaria or tuberculosis, where daily adherence is just a massive barrier, especially in resource-limited settings. Lenacapavir is really kind of a vanguard in this new frontier of drug delivery. Its success paves the way for a whole new era of public health interventions that are potentially more patient-friendly, more scalable.
That's exciting from a tech perspective.
It is. But beyond that, this case just vividly highlights the enduring, seemingly intractable challenge of equitable access to medical innovation. We keep developing these incredible scientific tools, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, yet the persistent bottleneck remains. How do we distribute them fairly, justly, efficiently to everyone who needs them, especially when they represent global public health goods?
It's the perennial problem.
It is. It's not new. We saw it with the first HIV drugs. We saw it with hepatitis C treatments. We saw it very recently and dramatically with COVID-19 vaccines. But each new breakthrough just brings this fundamental access question sharply back into focus. It forces a global reckoning again and again.
And what about that ethical tightrope for the pharmaceutical companies themselves?
Hmm.
How do we as a society balance their undeniable need for profit, which funds future R&D, vital for new cures, with what seems like an overwhelming moral imperative to save lives? Especially when a drug has this pandemic-ending potential.
Yeah.
It feels like an impossible tension to resolve.
It is a profound, almost agonizing dilemma, and society hasn't fully resolved it, clearly. Pharmaceutical companies, as we discussed, they operate within a market system. Profit isn't just a luxury for them, it's considered essential to reinvest in that incredibly expensive, incredibly risky process of drug discovery. Without that incentive, the argument goes, the groundbreaking innovations we rely on might simply dry up.
Right. No profit, no new drugs.
That's the argument. However, when a drug reaches the level of having pandemic-ending potential, a new layer of moral complexity is definitely added. The public good, you could argue, begins to take precedence over simply maximizing short-term shareholder returns. This isn't to say companies shouldn't profit. They absolutely should be rewarded for their innovation and risk, but it raises fundamental questions about the scale of that profit, especially when measured against the cost of millions of lives, the destabilizing economic impact of prolonged pandemics, and just the basic concept of human dignity.
It forces a different calculation.
It forces us to confront the inherent tension between pure market logic and a profound humanitarian need. And we are seeing increasing calls for new models, maybe where governments or philanthropic organizations take on more of the early stage R&D risk, allowing for lower prices for the finished product, or where there are more robust global agreements on things like tiered pricing or compulsory licensing in emergencies to ensure universal access.
And how complex is global drug pricing itself?
Yeah.
Beyond just the manufacturing cost and R&D recoupment, It seems like a complete labyrinth.
Oh, it truly is an incredibly complex, multifaceted system. It's far from a simple cost-plus model. It's not just the manufacturing cost, as the Liverpool study brilliantly demonstrates. It's also about intricate market dynamics, what different countries are willing and, maybe more importantly, able to pay, based on their diverse healthcare systems, national budgets, their negotiating power.
Which varies hugely.
Hugely. Then you have intellectual property rights, patent protections. They grant companies exclusive marketing rights for a period, typically 20 years from filing. This allows them to recoup investment without immediate generic competition. But even within that, there are strategies like evergreening, where minor modifications might extend patent life, further delaying affordable generics.
Right.
There's also the challenge of market segmentation companies charging different prices in different countries, which can lead to issues like parallel imports. And finally, there's the critical element of political will, the willingness of governments, international bodies, philanthropic groups to negotiate aggressively, to subsidize access, to really push for equitable distribution. All these factors just interweave. They create this very opaque, often inequitable, and fiercely debated pricing landscape.
It sounds incredibly messy.
It is, and this case also powerfully underscores the critical importance of sustained advocacy from organizations like UNAIDS, from dedicated, intrepid researchers like Dr. Hill, their persistent pressure, their ability to expose the raw cost data. That's often what forces these uncomfortable but absolutely necessary conversations. It pushes for greater transparency and ultimately for change within the industry.
So for you, our listener, this story of Lenacapavir, it really isn't simply about a scientific marvel. As breathtaking as the science is, it's a profound microcosm. It reflects the biggest global health challenges we face today. And it shines this powerful spotlight on the inherent power dynamics, the ethical dilemmas, the economic realities within the global pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
It teaches us, I think, that groundbreaking innovation alone, while necessary, is never enough. Equitable, universal access is equally, if not more, vital to truly impacting human well-being on a global scale.
Exactly. And this raises an incredibly important question for all of us, I think. Something to sit with long after this deep dive. What does the story of lenacapavir, a drug that holds the genuine power to finally end one of humanity's longest-standing pandemics, what does it tell us about our collective responsibility as individuals, as nations, as a global community? What does it truly mean to ensure that scientific breakthroughs, often paid for by immense collective investment and effort, genuinely serve all humanity? It forces us to confront the profound difference between a drug being technologically possible and it being truly globally available to everyone who needs it. Are we building a world where the best, most transformative medical advances are primarily accessible only to the wealthiest? Or are we building one where their benefits are shared widely enough to genuinely impact global health and secure a more equitable future for everyone?
That's a powerful question to end on.
It's a question that demands our continued attention and our action.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating, complex, and sometimes frustrating world of medical innovation and global access. We truly hope you feel much better informed about the critical discussions surrounding drugs like lenacapavir and the broader implications for global health equity.
We hope so.
We encourage you to continue exploring these complexities because understanding them is always the essential first step toward advocating for a more just and healthier future for all.